Weeks after the official end of the legislative year, state lawmakers have finally reached a deal on a nearly $3 billion spending bill, which will, among other things, fund Massachusetts shelters overwhelmed by the influx of migrants into the state. But while the Democratic supermajorities in both the State House and Senate have managed to come together, Republicans are not on board. And since lawmakers are working on these issues outside of formal sessions, the handful of GOP lawmakers on Beacon Hill have the power to derail the process. GBH News State House reporter Katie Lannan joins me on what she has been hearing. Katie, first off, how would this $250 million, the supplemental spending bill contains for shelter, how would it be used exactly?
So there are some specific breakdowns there, and one of the key features is it would require Governor Reilly and her team to set up an emergency overflow site by the end of the year for families who are waitlisted for shelter. And there's a provision in this compromise bill that would make the rest of the money inaccessible to the administration if they don't get that site up and running. It's a contingent on doing that. There's also some data reporting requirements. They'd have to keep the legislature abreast of what's happening with the shelter system.
And we should mention, this is not the only item in the bill, right, which could play into the politics of how this shakes out. What else is in this supplemental spending bill that's significant?
There's a lot that's in there. It's, as you said, Adam, almost $3 billion. A lot of that money would go to the Mass Health program. There's disaster relief funding for communities hit by flooding and other severe weather earlier this year. One big piece that gets a lot of attention up here at the State House is overdue raises for public workers would be funded by some money in this bill. That's, driven a lot of folks to a point of frustration waiting for their new paychecks to come in.
Yeah, I think that's an understandable dynamic. So can you explain, we've talked before about how close to irrelevant Republicans are on Beacon Hill, but in this case, they're very relevant. Procedurally, what can they do to keep this from moving forward, and how do you think the Democrats are likely to respond?
So at this point in the legislative calendar, where the legislature is only having informal sessions, all bills have to pass unanimously. So any dissenting vote from a Republican can stop a bill. They also have a procedural move they can use to effectively end a session, to force the House or the Senate to adjourn for the day without considering the bill. So that's what we saw immediately take place the first day, Thursday, that this compromise bill was released by Democrats. And, the Republicans say they're ready to keep it up, and Democrats say they're ready to keep trying. I think there'll be a bit of a staring contest here to see which side is willing to back down first. Okay,
here's something I'm confused by that you, because you know much more about the State House than I do, can help explain to me and any viewers who might also be confused. Why don't Democratic legislative leaders who run the show, why don't they just say, all right, well, we'll go back into formal session because these things are important. We got to get this done. The Republicans are being a pain, but we'll do what we got to do.
We ultimately could see that happen. The Republicans are trying to make that happen. In fact, they want to continue debating the bill in a formal session. But that's a move that's only happens very rarely, 3 times in the last few decades. So it's a big deal, even though it doesn't seem like it would be as you and I are talking. It seems like it might be an obvious solution in one regard, but it's not something that's done lightly or frequently on Beacon Hill. It really is considered a big step. And I don't think the Democrats want to give the Republicans what they want here. They see the Republicans as obstructing this process.
Can you explain, and we've got just about 45 seconds left, why is it such a big deal? Is it a big deal because the legislature really likes to sort of keep its time off once they've broken for the year? Or is it a big deal because procedurally, for example, it's complicated to resume formal sessions?
I haven't been up at the State House when they have come back into a formal session in an off period. So I don't know how complicated it would be personally, but I think it's more of a political concern. They don't want to give Republicans a win and maybe set a precedent.
Very interesting and also very weird. It's one of these things, I think, that from outside the State House, it's just kind of hard to wrap your brain around the logic of all of it. Katie Lannan, good to see you as always, and thanks for the primer on what's going on up there.
Thanks, Adam.